So my Can Talk is on refugees, and the book is Little Bee by Cleave. And this book is actually really interesting. Gotta be honest, I didn't know anything about the author when I first chose it. I was just like, oh, the name sounds cool. I bet he'll have a cool book. So I picked it. Little Bee was one of his more popular books. And I read the description, and it sounded like a really emotional book, so I was like, okay, I'll read it. It was pretty depressing, actually. There was a lot of there was some rape, murder, and just like the general struggles that refugees face, and it was pretty enlightening. So the narration in this book kind of goes back and forth. One chapter, it's by a Nigerian girl who goes by Little Bee. You never really find, well, you do find out her real name, but not till the end of the book. And Sarah, who's this British woman. And one thing that really struck me was Little Bee, on like page 1 or 2 of the book, says that she wishes she could be a British pound coin. And like, she doesn't really go into detail at first, like she waits a couple pages before she does. And when I first read it, I was like, okay, I don't know why you want to be like British pound coin. But when she finally gets into explaining it, it's because they can move between countries and people without any barriers. And, you know, it's kind of telling you know, you've got this probably 10 or 11-year-old girl who's wishing she could be a piece of currency. And then I also saw a little reference to, you know, how money rules the world. Countries are more focused on, you know, the cost and profits they're making rather than moral or ethical choices that they might be making. So a little background on the book, or a little summary. It starts off with Little Bee, and she's in her village with her sister, and an oil company comes in, and they're like, hey, we want your village as an oil field. If you're not going to leave, we're going to kill you all. And so they don't want to leave, so they massacre her village, and Little Bee and her sister escape. And so the first couple chapters is kind of them running through the jungle, being chased by the 6 soldiers and their dogs. And they make it all the way to the beach where this hotel compound is, and they see this white couple out on the beach, and they're like, oh, let's go like talk to them for help. So they're running up to them, and so this white couple, the wife's name is Sarah, the husband's name is Andrew. Sarah had been having an affair with Lawrence, who was this guy she should not have known, somehow met him through work. And she got this free trip through her work after Andrew found out about the affair. And so she was like, hey, like, let's try and patch things up, let's go on this trip together, maybe we can salvage our marriage. And so they're walking on the beach, they wanted to leave the compound, finally get out of like the hotel, and this guard's running up to them saying, hey, you know, like it's not safe out here, but they think it's a scam, they're like we're not listening to you. So they keep walking, and then the guard's trying to get them to come back, and then they see Little Bee and her sister run out of the village. And so Little Bee and her sister run up, and they're like, hey, please help us, like we need help. The guard's trying to shoot them away, and then all of a sudden the soldiers and the dogs run out of the woods. And so when the soldier and them run up, the guard tries to protect them and say, hey, leave. They end up killing the soldier, and then it's just Andrew, Sarah, Little Bee, and her sister. So from there on, the soldiers are saying, okay, because Sarah and Andrew are trying to barter for, you know, the little girls' lives, and they're saying, okay, what can we do to get you to save them? And they're saying, okay, you know what? The white man has given me the middle finger for so long, I want yours. And so for each little girl, Sarah and Andrew had to cut off their middle finger. And so, yeah. And so Andrew goes down, he's the first to go down, and he goes down with a knife, they give him a machete, and he goes down to cut his middle finger, but he can't do it, because Andrew's a wuss. And he can't give up his middle finger to save a little girl's life. Just kind of, you know, that. But that's besides the point. So he goes up, and then he's trying to take a coward's way out, say, you know, like, let me and my wife go, and you can have the girls. Like, it's fine. Well, no, this didn't happen. And as he's like trying to like talk to the soldiers, his wife cuts off her middle finger, and she gives it to them, and she's like, Andrew, like, what the heck, little shit. But yeah, so Sarah's kind of disgusted with him, and they say, okay, you gave us one. Little Bee lives, sister dies. And so they tell Sarah and Andrew to leave. They put Little Bee under like this canoe that was kind of on the shore, and then they rape her sister, break each of her bones, while like Little Bee is under the canoe, and she can hear her sister like screaming out scripture verses, like, so it's pretty bad. And then after they're done, they like cut her up, eat her, and then like throw the parts of her that they don't eat in the ocean. So yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty depressing. So she waits until the guards fall asleep, and then she escapes. But that's kind of it in terms of them interacting with Sarah and Andrew in Nigeria. So they go back, but Little B had found Andrew's wallet on the sand in the beach, and so she's like, okay, I'm gonna make it to them in Britain. And so then it kind of like skips a little bit, and it fast forwards to her in a detainment center in Britain, where she spends her next like 2 years, because she tried to go, but she didn't have papers or a caseworker, and so right when she got there, they took her, and that was that. So look, another thing that was kind of crazy to me was that, you know, she's been through so much, she's so emotionally traumatized, she still thought the men were going to be coming after her, even in a completely different country. And so anytime she'd enter a new room, like she'd walk through this door, the first thing she'd think about is, okay, how can I kill myself in this room if they come for me? She'd be like, oh, like I'll hit my head on the side of this desk or something like that. And so that was like the first thing, no matter what room she walked in. And so she actually gets out of the detainment center by accident. One of her like fellow refugees actually had sex with a detainment officer. She was like, okay, like if I have sex with you, will you let me go? And he's like, sure. But he couldn't just let her go because that looked suspicious. So he checks off some random boxes, and Little B got let go by accident, or not accident, by coincidence. So they get one call each, and she's like, okay, well I only have this number. She calls Andrew, and meanwhile Andrew's been going through all this guilt because, you know, he didn't save her sister, and it's something that's haunted him for a really long time. So when he gets that call, he's like, who is this? She's like, Little B, I need to come like stay with y'all. And he's like, don't like call this number again, don't talk to us, don't mess with my family. And so he's feeling really guilty. So when she shows up at his door, he like can't handle it. He thinks she's a ghost kind of haunting him, and so he ends up killing himself. And so yeah, there's a lot of death. Leaving his wife and his son Charlie by themselves. And so they don't even know that like Little B had shown up. He had kept it from them. And so Little B shows up a couple days later. And Sarah's kind of like dismissive of her at first, but then she's like, okay, like you can stay with us, you don't know anyone. Her lover Lawrence comes over, tries to like get her to let Little B, or like turn in Little B to immigration, but she doesn't. And Little B ends up like having a positive influence in her life. And she's there for her and her son. She's very good with her son Charlie. And so that's kind of Cleave's theme, is you know, there's a lot of struggle that people face in life, especially struggles that refugees face. And you know, we here at Bishop Lynch, and in America in general, we live a privileged life. Like I live a privileged life, there's no denying that. We're not really accustomed to dealing with the struggles they face. Like, they're coming from war, genocide, they're running from militant groups. And here in America, we're not really quite used to that. And you know, like these kids, they face severe trauma. One of my examples I used was the Lost Boys of Sudan. And they like looked at about 400 of them, and 1 in 5 had post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's like, there's like what, 15 of us in here now? That's like 3 of us have post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's a scary statistic. And you know, these kids are younger than us, or same age, and it's kind of crazy to think about. They're going through, you know, seeing their parents killed, or their siblings like raped and tortured, and it's a scary thought. And then when they come to a new country, it can be just as emotionally traumatizing because they're not welcomed. They come in, and you know, countries and politicians are really focused on themselves and not so much, like I was talking about earlier, the ethical and moral choices that they should make. And so we may not be as accepting of refugees, but they're running from struggles that, you know, we don't face here. They're running from things that actually endanger their lives, and we're talking about, you know, we'll send them back, or we're not going to let them in. Just kind of that, going back to like, you know, money rules the world. I saw there was an article that Trump had planned to further limit the amount of refugees he lets into the country based on cost, because he was too worried, you know, it's going to get too expensive or whatever. It's like, you know, we can figure out a way to allocate money and resources to allow these people like safe haven from their countries. We don't need to be worried about money. We need to be worried about, you know, doing the right thing. Because when you start letting money cloud your judgment and affect your morality, you know, that's when humanity is lost. So, and not only that, they face a lot of language and cultural barriers because a lot of these refugees may come here not speaking English, and you know, in America, the primary language is English. So they'll come here and they may not be able to get a job because they don't speak, or they may not be able to get a job, like a fair job with fair wages, because they don't speak English and they don't have papers. So they'll come here and people will take advantage of that. And cultural barriers too. You know, some refugees might be like undergoing abuse here, and like in Nigeria, for example, there's a lot of corrupt military and corrupt police, and so they have less trust with law enforcement. Whereas here, like in general, not like all cases, but in general, like we have a pretty good law enforcement system, and so they're not accustomed to, you know, trusting these individuals with their lives. So yeah, it was just book was about refugee struggles, and